So let's look a little more closely at the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. So you'll notice that when you first signed in, I had you just click on begin test now, but there's actually an informational screen there that shows you what all the buttons do. And I do want to point out that right here, there's a calculator button that you probably didn't notice because you weren't doing a math test. But if you were doing a math test, that calculator button is available for you right next to the zoom in and zoom outs. And there may be other tools as well. The one thing you should know is that sometimes tools are available and sometimes they're not. So especially with the calculator, sometimes they want you to use it and sometimes they don't, in which case it won't be there. And then there was a whole lot of information that you could have scrolled through and read, but instead I had you just check out the tools and see what you could find. So let's jump into the test and make sure we understand those tools. Hopefully this took you only a few seconds to figure out how to expand and then bring it back, especially if you're getting eye fatigue, if you're feeling tired from reading all those questions on the test. It's a really good idea to expand your reading selection and zoom in so that you're working with large font, and it's just so much easier on your eyes after a day of testing. So let's zoom back out, and here we can see the questions. There I am shrinking the text for you. Let's see, I'm looking at my checklist to see what else I'm missing. I did want you to highlight, and some of these commands I think are a little funny, so I wanted to make sure you knew how to do that. That you have to highlight it, you have to actually highlight the text. By the way, this red circle is just showing up for the video. Normally you would not see a red circle around the mouse. And then I click up here on the 3 lines, and I click on the highlight selection, and that's how I do it. So I have to actually highlight the text first and then click that I want it highlighted, which is the opposite of how the strike through works. With the strike through, you have to click on strike through and then cross out an answer that you think is not correct. By the way, it's a really good tool as a test taker to think about what answers are definitely not right and just remove them so they're not distracting you. It's very easy to be a distracted test taker with all that stuff that's all over your screen there. Let's see, if I want to unstrike through, I can click on that. Let's look at my other options that are available. Yes, the Notepad. What I found is that you write yourself a note, not B, and you save it, and then now you have this little note here saying that you have a note. But if you click on it, click, click, nothing happens. You have to come back to those 3 lines and click on Notepad to see your note again. It's kind of hidden. Don't love that, but that's how you find it now. The other thing is you can flag a question and come back to it later. And I'll talk about the coming back to later because that's an important issue. We'll get to that in a second though. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the definitions. I don't know if you can see this, but there are tiny lines around certain words. And then if you put the cursor over it, it actually turns blue. And then if you click on it, you will see the actual definition right there. Sometimes they'll do it for words that you know. Do you all know what the word store means? I do too. But how are they using it in this sentence? You'll notice that the definition, a supply of wild currants, supply is probably different than what you first think of when you think of the word store. So they do give you the specific definition for the context. That's pretty handy. They didn't define any words in the story, but they did define words in the questions. And so that's a really good way to find a little bit more meaning for you. So for example, sometimes they define phrases. Again, very useful and not immediately obvious. You need to know to look for it before you can find those definitions. Okay, let's talk about question 2. This is a tricky one. What is the author's message about the Oregon Trail? Okay, that's a pretty straightforward question. The Oregon Trail was hard, but it's not a 1-sentence answer that they're looking for. You'll notice this phrase right here, use the details from the text to support your answer. Specifically, I'm looking at that S in the word details. They want more than one detail from the text. So that means that you are going to have to quote or paraphrase two different parts of the text when you write an answer. You can't just get away with saying that it was bad and then maybe mentioning one thing in the text. So I would say that to give a really solid answer to this question, you would need to write a well-written paragraph, 4 to 5 sentences at least. You can't get away with just a sentence or two. And you do need to quote or paraphrase from the text. And yes, English conventions matter. Periods, capital letters, commas, writing incomplete sentences, spelling. You'll notice that there is no spell check. Right. They don't tell me when I make mistakes at all. You need to be your own spell checker. That's part of the test. Okay. One more little tip. When you're quoting from the text, it's a good idea to quote from different parts of the text. You don't want to take a detail here and a detail in the next sentence. You want to take one from a paragraph near the beginning and a paragraph near the end, or at least the middle and the end, or something like that. So different parts of the text really show that you read the whole thing. One more tip, still about question number 2. Here it's asking, what is the author's message? But you might have noticed that a few questions later, they ask this question: which statement best summarizes the central idea of the text? Do you think the central idea is very similar to the author's main message? I think it is. So I would look at these possible answers, figure out which answer I think is the right one. And then maybe when you're writing this paragraph in question number 2, where you'll write a real sentence, maybe paraphrase one of those answers. So obviously you're not going to be reading about the Oregon Trail and you won't have these exact questions, but you will have questions that sort of answer other questions. So it's a good idea to look through all of them. Here's another spot the test makers use to sort of trip you up. If it says select 3 options, you should have 3 different answers, even if you think only 2 are right. Part of the test is, are you reading closely and are you following directions? That is what they're looking for, amongst other things. So if it's asking for 3 options, you have to select 3. You may have noticed in years past that you have to answer all your questions before you can go on. But in a question like this where it says select 3 options, you can check just one and it'll still let you go on, even though they're telling you to check 3. So make sure that you read those details and answer every single thing that it's asking. I've answered all the questions in the first page, and I'm about to hit that next button. Now, I want to tell you something about this test that is very different from the way the tests work with the old bubble sheet ones. In the bubble sheet tests, you would have, however, 45 questions, and they would all be the same essential questions for every kid. This is what's called a computer adaptive test, which means that as soon as I hit that next button, the computer is going to score my answers. And then based on how well I did on those first 9 questions, it will give me a set of questions that it thinks are about at my level. So if I do really well, it might give me some harder questions. And if I do not so well, it might give me some easier questions. Now, some of you are thinking, ooh, easy questions are better. Easy questions are below your grade level. So I've jumped ahead to question number 17 because I find it a very odd question. You'll notice that the whole screen is just text, but that the same paragraph is copied twice. Which, if you first glance at it, like, what do I need to do? There aren't any questions, etc. The instructions are written before and after the text. And so this sentence right here is actually, this sentence right here is the one that's telling you exactly what you need to do. Now, as a teacher, if I wanted directions to be clear, I would put them in a box or write an arrow next to it, or at least put it in bold or a different font, but that's not what they're doing here. They are testing your reading and assuming that you're reading every word and thinking about it. So here's the description of what the writing is. This is the sample of student writing. These are the directions for what you need to do as a test taker. And you have to click on sentences in here. By the way, in the first paragraph, there are the definitions. There we go. There are the definitions within the paragraph. And in the second paragraph are the sentences that you can click on. Sometimes you will find sentences that you think are the right answer, and so you click on it. If it doesn't let you click on that sentence, it's the wrong answer. Pick a different sentence to click on. Okay, and again, it said click on 2 sentences. Pay attention to those instructions. You select your 2 sentences, and then you say next. Keep in mind that as you go to the next page, it is assessing you, and you really do want it to keep offering you higher and higher level, or at least keeping you at 8th grade level questions. If you just flag your questions planning to come back to them, the test itself will assume that you're working below grade level and will give you 6th grade, 5th grade, 4th grade questions. And then at the end, even if you go back and get them all right, you're never going to be able to bring yourself back up to grade level. So really use that flag tool, but try to answer it right the first time. Don't just click anything and think, oh, I'll come back to it. Judgments are being made instantaneously. So hopefully we've helped you out with seeing some tips. You'll see that the test is fairly manageable, assuming you read everything. There are some not so obvious parts to it that now you know where the hidden tools are and where the secret definitions are, if nothing else. So what I would like you to do lastly is on this paper, make sure that you write a tip to yourself, a little reminder, and your teachers will share those back with you in a little bit. Right before you take the test, you'll be reminded of some suggestions that you all came up with. And lastly, use the next 10 minutes, 5 minutes to browse for a book, and then at least 5 minutes of silent reading, which should be easy on this day of silence. And make sure you check out some things so that you have something to read over the weekend. Thanks for being here.